are the New York Mets sitting there in the National League East, 2 games back. They're 4 back of the wild card. What are the Mets' chances, as we're currently sitting here right now, late July, Ron, of making a run?
Well, you know, Rich, the last week they've gotten a lot better. I think the addition of the 2 Braves that came over, Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe, I think will pay dividends, and they've already paid dividends already. Both are professional hitters. I'm asked about that all the time. What's a professional hitter? It's a guy that's not going to be awed by the experience. He's not going to be put in a pressure situation where it's going to get the best of him. He's going to take a good situational at bat if you need him to do it. He'll lay down a bunt, whatever it takes. And both of those players are like that. And I think the addition of Clippard yesterday, Tyler Clippard from the Oakland A's, who'll be able to set up Jay Reese Familia, is just fantastic. Clippard had some unbelievable numbers in the National League East when he was with the Nationals, and I don't see him doing anything less in a Mets uniform. So that both of those moves are huge, I think, for the Mets, and it puts them in a position where I think they can go out and have those last 2 months that might mean something to get them close.
Now, they are professional hitters and pitchers in that regard that you mentioned them. They're also what many people and observers would say affordable for a New York Mets team that we all know has the tightened belt in a manner that drives Mets fans crazy and for being in the #1 market in the United States. Is there any chance that Jose Reyes, who's been traded to Colorado, and Troy Tulowitzki to Toronto, and people believe are maybe up for being flipped elsewhere, that the Mets would go ahead and maybe put some fannies in the seat, to use the old Steinbrenner phrase, and get certainly an old Met like Reyes back in the mix, Ron?
My feeling, and this is just my feeling, from what I've seen of a recent note, I would say no, that's not going to happen, because the only chip to get Reyes or Tulowitzki is going to be one of those 6 outstanding pitchers that they have, and I'm including Zach Wheeler, who's on the mend with Tommy John surgery right now, and I don't think they're going to get rid of any of those 6 pitchers. So I think that's going to be the issue to stop them, not only from getting those players, but I also think they're not going to take on that kind of salary. There was a reason Reyes wasn't signed in the first place. He probably is the most exciting person to ever wear a Mets uniform. Wasn't re-signed, and I think there's a reason for that. And I don't see either of them in a Mets uniform. That being said, when you watch the games every night like I do and call the games every night, boy, you'd love to have an exciting player like that. It makes your job easy.
Well, so, Ron, let's say the Mets do get into that 1-game wild card situation. Who do you think Collins sets up for that 1-game must-have win? Do they go Harvey or deGrom in that spot, Ron?
Yeah, right. Got a great question, Rich. I think right now Jacob deGrom gets the nod. Only because you don't know where Harvey's going to be pitch limit-wise when you get down to late September. deGrom has been their best pitcher. Remember, Harvey's coming off that Tommy John, and he's been their best pitcher and most overpowering pitcher. Was able to pitch a little better, dare I say, against Zach Greinke in his last start, and Zach has been just about perfect. So deGrom gets the call today, but you and I, you know as well as I know, things can change in a month or two.
So is Harvey himself, Ron?
I think Harvey is himself. He's coming off an injury. I think that he's going to win 12 to 15 games coming off an injury, which I think is so admirable. And but you're not going to see the finest of you'll see it in snippets, but I don't think you'll see a 2013 season until next year. And I expect Harvey next year will be a bear of a pitcher, and it'll be everything that he wants to be and that everyone wants to watch.
Well, I'm on the phone with Ron Darling of SNY here on the Rich Eisen Show. I'm going to ask you a couple of things based off of something John Smoltz said. First one from Smoltz's mouth a couple weeks ago is that the current Mets starters, or with deGrom and Harvey, and I guess you mentioned Syndergaard, you want to throw in there too, better than his triumvirate that are all in the Baseball Hall of Fame right now of Smoltz and Glavine and Maddox. What do you think, Ron, about that?
Well, I
more
think
talented.
One, John, who I love, is probably being overly humble. I think the other person you have to include in that big 3 that no one really includes in Atlanta because of injury, Steve Avery, for his short time, was as good as any young left-handed pitcher I ever saw. And injury stopped him from being one of the greats. That being said, I think what John is alluding to, and I don't want to speak for John, that I don't think you've ever seen a collection as far as the number of pitchers. Every team, good team will have a Kershaw, Greinke, or they'll have two. They might have three. But very few teams have so many young pitchers under team control in the beginning of their career and this talented, 95-plus guys. I don't think there's ever been an assemble of this many young players at this beginning of their career. You have to remember, Atlanta, Maddox had already had a career in Chicago, had won a Cy Young. So, when he came to Atlanta, he was an established pitcher. Both Maddox and Smoltz by that time were established in their own right. These guys were all starting their career, and they're starting at such a high level. I think that's what makes them unique and probably what was John alluding to.
Well, all the more reason then maybe to flip one of them for a big bat. Now, I know this isn't fantasy baseball and that not every bat is available, but isn't that the tantalizing aspect here? Just take one of them and dangle them out there and see what big bat might come back and try and win the division this year.
I totally agree with you, Rich. I think that I alluded to the big numbers that they have of all these young, talented pitchers. And I've heard before that you can never have too much pitching. But you know what? If you leave that pitching naked, without any hitting, without any runs scored, what good does it do? There's only one way you can win with pitching if you don't hit the ball. You do what the Kansas City Royals did last year, and that is play unbelievable defense. I'm talking about top-of-the-line defense, and scratch and don't strike out and put the ball in play with 2 outs. Well, the Mets offense does not do that. Their defense certainly isn't on the par of the Kansas City Royals. So if you're going to have these great young pitchers, you've got to produce some runs for them if you're going to be an elite team. And I agree with you. As tough as it is to take one of these talented arms and take a chance on pushing them someplace else, sometimes you have to do that. You're not going to get a quality guy to come your way unless you dangle one of these great young pitchers, because that's what every team needs. Every team in baseball wants a young guy that throws 95 that has control, and that's what the Mets have in spades.
And then the other John Smoltz comment I want to hit you on, Ron Darling, is what he said in his Hall of Fame induction speech, mentioning how he's the first ever member of Cooperstown to have had Tommy John surgery and make it to those hallowed halls, and pointing out to parents to say, hey, kids, baseball's not a year-round sport. Because just because Tommy John exists, that's not a Band-Aid. It's a serious surgery. Where do you stand on that subject, Ron?
Well, John and I have spent a lot of time talking about these things, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. Not only should kids play other sports, because the other sports build up different muscles, which puts them in a little better place to handle the rigors of being a professional athlete someday. I think the other thing that kills young pitchers, especially, Rich, is that some cuckoo fathers and coaches want to put a ray gun or a radar gun on these kids at 13, 14, 15 years old. And I don't care who you are. I remember when I was 13, 14, what do you do when a radar gun's on you? You try to break it. You try to throw as hard as you can. That's not good for these young arms either. So those things have to be taken out of play also. And I think, the most important thing for me with young pitching is that, when I came up, I was taught by the older pitchers that, you started a game, you kind of ended the game. It was a marathon. You worked your way through 3 or 4 times through the lineup. Nowadays, it's really 2 hours of frenzy that these starting pitchers go through. They are throwing as hard as they can, as long as they can. And we've done a great job in building up muscles around the shoulder, but you can't do anything around that little tiny ligament that's in your elbow. And to put that kind of stress on it continued down that stretch, we're just going to see more and more Tommy Johns. But I agree with John wholeheartedly. Take the radar gun out of play. Don't have these kids trying to break their arm to throw 90 miles an hour. Teach them how to pitch. And the most important for those folks out there that think that they're going to make their son or daughter a professional athlete, you know what? You're not going to produce a professional athlete. Professional athletics find you. If you're good enough, they will definitely find you. You don't have to go out and try to produce a daughter or son who can do that.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.